So I think we are ready and we can start. And to be honest with you, this spot after lunch is really challenging. Everyone just had their meals. We are keeping our energy to digest and not to listen. So we meant to make this talk really lightweight, for you really easy to digest and something really inspirational that you can take away with you. So my name is Kasia, and together with me there's Rafal.
Hi everyone.
And our topic for today is Google Home, and we will be taking a look what Google Home is all about, what the voice technology is all about, and we've entitled it the post-mobile era. So when it comes to post-mobile, it sounds really strict, really controversial, I would say. And we are living in times when the technology is evolving really, really quickly. So when we are talking about post-mobile, we do not say that we are getting rid of mobiles, as we did with computers. So in post-PC era, we didn't get rid of computers, we just changed the way how we use computers. So it started with computers being those really powerful but singular items and objects, and just a few of the people and the entire planet had access to it. But the situation started to change. We connected computers to networks to make it even more powerful, to give more people access to it, to use the power of it. Then we started as humanity to experiment with networks, with wire network, but also wireless network that gave the opportunity for even more people to use computers. So computers from these huge machines started to evolve into something really portable, really small. And this is the computers we know for now. And while I am speaking to you, I think all of us here can consider ourselves power users of computers. But we are still using the small devices, really portable, but really, really powerful. So from this moment, the technology from something being available just to few of the people, it becomes something that is omnipresent. And after the computer shrunk, we started to experiment with mobile. And there were first mobile phones appearing on the market. At first, they were focused on just making the calls and sending the text. But soon, due to the expansion of the technology, they became even more powerful. They became smartphones. We also started to create some applications even more powerful. And right now, many people across the globe are experimenting with how to make networks better, to send even more data, to make it quick, and to make it very seamless. So this is what happens with the period when we were focused on PCs, then we were focused on mobile. So it happens really quickly. And there's this guy called Edward Abbey. He's an American writer, and he died in '89. But what is really important is the quote from one of his memoirs. It was definitely before 1989. And he mentioned that my computer tells me that in 25 years there will be no more computers. So it was 80s, late 80s. But computers that he knew of. So as you can imagine, the technology is evolving so quickly that we can predict what is going on to happen, and we can make these predictions with really high probability, but still there is a little unknown in there. So what is coming next? We had PCs, we had mobiles, and right now the technology is evolving too. And what is happening in general is the movements that happens in voice. So voice recognition actually hit 95%, which is as much as humans can do, because our voice recognition is not at 100% because we sometimes can hear, because of the noise, for example, because we didn't get something. And the same happens with technology. So technology can understand 95% of what we are saying. But also, the NLP and the machine learning are progressing really, really quickly. And that enables new kind of devices to enter the market, which are the smart speakers. So smart speakers, those portable devices that you can plug in your house, living room, kitchen, wherever, that you can talk to, and they can provide you access to your products and the services that you use on a daily basis. And this is Google Home, and out of curiosity, who of you own some kind of smart speaker at home? Okay, some of you, perfect. So when it comes to Poland, Polish is not supported on any of the platforms. So the access that we have in Poland to smart speakers is really limited, but what we can see in other markets is this really rapid growth of technology, and smart speakers are entering many, many houses. So why should we as developers, as the creators of the technology, even consider it as something really interesting? Because, you know, smart speakers, we as power users of the computers, it's kind of a fun thing to play around. But for users of the technology, like casual users, it is a new thing. It is something to play around, and this is something that really can provide value. And the market is growing really quickly. We have numbers for you from the last quarter of 2016 and 2017. And as you can see, it got multiplied by 4. And we do not have numbers from this year, but we can expect that the market is growing even more than that. And when it comes to the brands of the speakers, we consider Amazon as pioneers in the field, but as you can see, Google is quickly catching up, and the market is growing as well. And what is there for the developers? Actually, those devices are really affordable. Both Amazon and Google devices, the smallest ones, cost around 50 euros. So for a price for a piece of technology is not that much. So almost everyone can afford it. We also have got access to all of the voice functions through our smartphones. So this is also something that we should pay attention to. And smart speakers are providing the users different kind of experience with technology. So we are not using the graphical interface, we are not using our hands to interact with it, but we are using our voice, something different. It is freeing our hands, and it also provides to have this multimodal experiences. So for example, we can start an action via voice, and then continue, for example, on our smartphones. This is something that didn't happen before. And also, what is even more important for us as the creators of the technology is the fact that those platforms are open for developers to create their own actions and their own applications that can be displayed there. So I will give my voice to Rafal, who can guide you even more in the technical details.
Alright, so maybe to start with, so as Kasia showed you, a lot of people are buying smart speakers, especially in Western markets like the US, in Germany. They have over 20% penetration in the market. But looking from our developers' perspective, which is very tech-savvy people's perspective, those technologies don't seem that promising, right? You won't write code using voice because that's just inconvenient. You won't do any like difficult, complex financial calculations in there. So what's in those smart speakers that a lot of people are buying them and are such big fans of those devices? So the power lays in its simplicity, in very casual, everyday tasks. So for example, imagine ordering a pizza. So usually you're either coming home late afternoon or in the evening. You feel hungry, you're a bit frustrated with that, so you want to catch up with food very quickly, right? So you order pizza to your apartment. So up until now, you'd have to either turn on your computer, go to Pizza Portal or whatever like pizza place's website, then pick your order from a huge list, configure all the details of your pizza, then type in your address, make the payment using one of the providers, sometimes enter your credit card details, which is a lot of effort for such a simple task. Later, we replaced web with mobile, so a lot of those places already have a mobile app, but it still requires you to take out your mobile phone out of your pocket or find it laying somewhere in your apartment. So there's a lot of hassle in a simple task, which is ordering the same pizza as usual to the same place as usual. So let's imagine this interaction with both technology and the outside world using a smart speaker, using a voice-controlled device. So it's really, really simple. You come to your house, there's this smart speaker somewhere in your living room or in your kitchen, and you just say to it, "Hey Google, order me a pizza." This thing is always listening, so it waits for this wake word, for this "Hey Google," and for your command, followed by that. So there's really no effort in ordering a pizza. You can do it just like that. It can also give you some summary, like, okay, I reordered, or you can see the invoice in your email. And then, when you're waiting for your pizza, instead of sitting in front of your computer, refreshing the website of the pizza place, you can simply ask it, "Hey, what's the status of the pizza? Is the guy already on his way?" So it really simplifies those simple interactions by taking a lot of hassle that was in between, that we kind of worked around using smartphones, websites, or maybe regular phone calls. It can make it just like that. And what's really interesting about this technology is that it's relatively new. So the first smart speaker was released by Amazon 3 years ago, which is not a very long time for technology. It has quite a big adoption, but it's still in its very early stages. And we like to compare smart speakers and voice assistants to mobile platforms 10 years ago. If you remember the first iPhone, where you couldn't copy-paste, when you couldn't change the app without closing it, right? That was very early smartphones, and they suffered from some issues. So a lot of people building custom apps for them were experimenting. So if you went to the App Store or to Play Store, in those early days, 10 years ago, you would find a lot of calculators, to-do lists, maybe some flashlights that were what people could think of in terms of smartphones. Some marketers experimented with using those mobile apps as a way of getting into customers' eyes, but it was still in its infancy phase. So the same thing is right now with smart speakers, with voice apps, because we don't really know that many use cases. We don't have that many inspirations out there that show the full potential of this technology. So everybody who's working with that is still actively experimenting, finding some good patterns and doing a lot of throwaway work or low-hanging fruits to-do lists, for example. Also, the technology itself and the hardware has a lot of constraints. We know that AI is progressing, but it's still not as intelligent as you might expect it to be. So there's a lot of things to work around there. And also those platforms don't have some basic features that would be great just to unleash creativity of developers and designers. And as I mentioned before, there's no good practices to follow. So very often you just have to invent things yourself, which is more difficult than just following the patterns that everybody's using. So this brings a lot of challenges, and smart speakers, which by design don't have any screen, bring even more challenges with this voice-only thing. And those challenges are mostly in terms of design, in terms of designing apps that we work with voice-only, but it also affects developers who are very close to those design challenges when building anything. So the first limit is lack of visuals. So when you open your mobile app, you don't really appreciate all of those buttons, forms, pictures that much because it's just obvious to you. But when you're building anything for voice, you'll quickly notice that it's very confusing for users because they don't have any buttons when they're speaking to a smart assistant. So there's no guidelines for them to follow. They don't know what they can use your app for, which is very, very challenging, and you need to find some workarounds around that. What works really well right now is focusing on one or two very simple use cases, and then letting your users know what they can do with this voice app, so that they can remember the possibilities. So for example, in pizza places, it's easy to just teach them, okay, you can use our pizza place voice app to make the same order as usual. And if that works for them, that's good enough for now. The other thing is that is mostly related to brands, like companies that want to have their logo everywhere, but also to users. So imagine you're opening McDonald's app, but there's no McDonald's logo, no red color in there. It can be very problematic because it doesn't give you this feeling that you're using this certain app that you want to be using. All that's left in those smart speakers is how this assistant replies to you. So it's kind of the lingo they're using, or maybe the tone of voice. Simple details like that. It's very challenging to design something that really stands out in the marketplace. Then there's a very interesting psychological thing, and is that we have this thing. I see some people are laughing already. So we have this thing wired in our brains that if something looks like human or has some human features, we expect this thing to be human-like, right? So if you have a smart speaker that you can talk to that responds to you using voice, it's very easy to assume that it's going to be intelligent, but it's not. The technology is not there. It can rather perform some simple actions, shortcuts, but users already have very high expectations towards that. So that's also a thing to work around. Very often they'll hear that, well, our voice app cannot do that yet, because they'll be asking it random things, even not related to our services. So people may ask, pizza place, what's the meaning of life? That's a bit problematic, but yeah, you have to keep that in mind, that people, if something speaks like a human, well, they expect it to be human. So there's plenty of challenges regarding design, and it also affects our development. We have to build good analytics into our products just to see what people are asking our app, because maybe we've missed some very strong use cases in that. And we also need to address all of those voice-only design things, like tone of voice, use the right text-to-speech, just to give users the right feeling of voice apps. But diving deeper, beyond design, what do you need to do in order to build voice apps? Because for a long time, none of those platforms allowed developers to build third-party integrations. Now it's possible, but it has some constraints around that, and you need to use the right tools for that. So a thing that's really worth mentioning at first is that if you look at this smart speaker like Google Home, it actually runs on Google Assistant as the broader platform. So Home is hardware, that's a speaker and microphone only, but then it uses Google Assistant underneath, and that's what you're really integrating with if you're building any sort of custom voice apps. So how do you integrate into Assistant? Well, how many of you have used Assistant before, like Google Assistant, maybe the app, maybe Smart? All right, so there's plenty of users already, which is great. So it gives you kind of like this maybe chatbot interface, right? You ask questions to it, and you get things in response. So a very the foundations of building custom integrations is this sentence that lets Google Assistant route some of your inquiries to a certain app that's third party. So if you ask, okay Google, what's in my calendar? It's handled by Google Assistant out of the box. But you can build custom what's called actions on Google that will respond to certain phrases. So if you look at this phrase, okay Google, ask Mega Pizza to order me a big Hawaiian. There's this Mega Pizza in that, right? So we're saying ask Mega Pizza to do something. So how it works is you can register your custom app, your third-party integration with the Assistant platform, with actions on Google, and you can book this name megapizza, which is called invocation name, and that's the phrase that tells assistant to route the whole command to your own app. So that's how you distinguish between apps. It's kind of like typing a website address in your browser, just using your voice and a certain name. And then our megapizza action, we receive the bigger command, which is order me a big Hawaiian. So Google takes care of speech to text, of the transcription, and of routing the request to the right app. And then we need to take care of the action itself. So that's actions on Google configuration panel. That's more or less like most of Google's configuration panels. You just set up your invocation, prepare the whole thing to be like launched to the actions store. So you need to write some kind of description, pick a logo, etc. with some details on how to use this action. Once you get that, you can get requests to your, for example, megapizza app. But what's the big picture of that? So we have Google Assistant that recognized that our action was meant to be handled by megapizza. So it knows that megapizza is our action, right? So when it recognizes a command like, okay Google, add megapizza to order a big Hawaiian, it passes the request to our NLP, which is supposed to further process this action and make some actions based on that, like, you know, on a code level. And then from this backend, at the very end, we can send some replies to Assistant. Like, we can manage dialogues. So for example, if user skips what kind of pizza they want, we can ask them, or we can just like, for example, if they're asking about status of their order, we can also reply with data from our server. The interesting thing here is the NLP, which is kind of like a front end in a regular app. So it takes care of processing users' requests, and then building like those machine-readable commands. Fortunately, you don't have to do a PhD in machine learning in NLP, because there are good solutions out there already, which is a very like engineering-like approach. So the major tool that you can use for handling this part is called Dialogflow. It used to be a startup for building chatbots. It's now actively used by Google as a dedicated solution for assistant actions. So how it works from developer's perspective, it's actually quite simple. Okay. So it consists of like two major parts, except this big configuration of how it should communicate with your backend. The first thing is intents. So if you think about voice apps, there are a few things that this app can do, right? So for pizza, it's like making an order or checking order status. So we define those kind of actions, which correspond to buttons in regular apps. And those are the things that we teach Dialogflow to recognize. And later, for each of those, for those actions, we have to prepare some kind of training set for the NLP to work, to be able to recognize users' commands. Because we don't want the user to have to explicitly say, okay Google, ask megapizza to make an order, because that's kind of stiff and people talk in a variety of ways. So what you can do is you can prepare like a lot of training phrases. It doesn't have to be exactly what users may say, because there's some kind of like error tolerance. But we need to prepare those commands that user may say in order to invoke this kind of action. It also allows to recognize some parameters in there. So for example, when the user is asking to order a big Hawaiian, we can put some placeholders that will recognize like the size of the pizza or the kind of the pizza, and that's how we can build this very complex interface in a very simple, that user perceives as very simple. So I think that's the end of the like general overview. It seems simple. There's a lot of more things in that, especially regarding actions managing dialog state, but that's like for later. And like at the end, I would also like to tell you a few things about the future of voice and what's happening in the space right now. Because we see those smart speakers, we know that there's support for English, German, but what's happening next? So, one thing that you may have heard of if you're following like tech news in general is that both Google and Amazon, with their leading platforms, are pushing to get more and more languages just to make those products widely available. So, for example, this week Google launched Assistant in Norway and Sweden, which makes it accessible in most of Scandinavia. There are also closed beta tests in Poland right now, so you may expect it to be available in Poland maybe this year, maybe early next year. It's definitely in progress. And that's like the key thing for both smart speakers and virtual assistants to be accessible by like globally. The other thing is what we're noticing is that those platforms, like assistant platform especially, they're becoming mature because, as I mentioned before, they lacked a lot of simple features that developers needed to build good experiences with. What's happening right now is that there's a major release like every week or every 2 weeks with lots of those tiny little features that add up to really great voice experiences. And the last thing is that a lot of like big name companies are pushing their voice experiments, and they already have some great insights into what works and what doesn't work, and into how to structure those conversations so that users will be happy with the experience rather than frustrated with talking to computers. So a great example is Domino's, which is like the biggest pizza chain in the US. So they launched their voice apps, and because this pizza ordering thing is just perfect, right? You order pizza to your home, where you have this smart speaker, you pay with the same credit card, and you're usually lazy, you don't like to experiment, so you're ordering the same thing as usual. So Domino's managed to shift 20% of their orders into smart speakers, which is a huge number, and it's also growing using just those smart speakers. It's so convenient that for majority of people, ordering a pizza became just easier, so they're doing more of that. Maybe ordering pizzas is not the best thing to do, but you get the thing. Yeah, so that's it from us.
Yeah, so since the topic is very new and we don't want to overwhelm you with things that we think are important, we decided to open it up for questions. And if there is something that you think is important, ask us. We especially like the questions that we cannot answer.
So I have a question because I brought the Google Home to my office, and a lot of people freak out about privacy. I didn't know why. Like for me, I was like, it wasn't a problem, but for some it was really a problem. So what do you think about that spectrum? People?
So that's like number one question that we get for showing those things to people. What's important to understand is how this wake word works, because that's the key to privacy. So, okay, I won't be changing the slides, but if you remember, there was this "Hey Google, ask Mega Pizza to order me pizza," right? So how it works on the hardware and software level is those devices, they do listen all the time, but they do that locally. So they don't send any of those recordings to the cloud, to Google's cloud or to Amazon's cloud. The key there is just to catch this wake word, which is "Hey Google," and that's meant for filtering like questions that are meant for those devices, right? Once they get that, they send like a 10-second recording of you speaking to an app. There may be some incidents when they catch something by accident, but those are like a tiny fraction of those requests.
Okay, thanks. So I want to ask, if I create an application like this Mega Pizza or something in English, and the user uses Polish, so
to make an order, can the user ask in Polish or have to do it in English?
So that's bound by the language somebody's using with their assistant. So right now, we need to create those voice apps targeting a certain language. So if somebody uses assistant in English, you will have to build your app in English. It also, like those languages that are available right now, they define what NLPs Google has for processing your requests, right? So you would need to do that in English. I know there are some experiments that even if the user is using the general assistant in English, you could speak to it, for example, in Spanish, to some apps that are actually Spanish-based. But it's a very experimental feature. It also complicates the user experience in general.
Okay, so I thought it is something like when I talk to assistant in Polish, it can automatically translate to English, and then my application can handle it. My application gives output in English, so it can again translate to Polish and the speaker talks. So I thought something like this.
Yeah, that may actually be available in the future. Just looking at how Google Translate works, it's pretty much okay, but there is still a lot of things to do there. I think one of the problems is recognizing, like when somebody is speaking to a smart speaker, to assistant, is recognizing the language at that point, right? Because that defines what you need to transcribe that for, and then translate to the right language.
But we can, for example, set it to Polish only or something.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
it's not there yet.
So I have a question, for example, about Mega Pizza voice application, and how this application can get your payment information.
So there are two models. One is that if you're using, for example, Google Home, there's also this Google Assistant app in your smartphones, and they're sharing the same assistant, and they're sharing the same Google account. So those voice apps, actions, whatever you name them, they have this feature called account linking. So you can pick up your phone, you can open Assistant, click into like Mega Pizza, and just log in there with your Mega Pizza account, right? It's like, wow. And then when you're using Assistant, even with your smart speaker, it can already identify you and sign in to Mega Pizza servers. So this way, if you have your credit card stored in Mega Pizza, it can use those data just to charge you for the orders. But there's also another option, which is Google Pay, or GPay, I don't remember what's the latest branding. So if you have your credit card connected to your Google account, those voice apps have some very basic APIs that allow them to ask the user if it's okay to use their stored credit card. And they can just send the money to Mega Pizza later.
And another example, so when you bring this home device to your office, and everyone will start to order pizza, so will it recognize who is the owner of the account?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges regarding that and ordering in general. So, for example, Amazon with Alexa, they require app developers to have some sort of like PIN confirmation if somebody's making too much orders for like a larger amounts. When it comes to filtering out other people, there are very early stage features that let you teach Assistant to recognize your voice when performing certain actions. So if you want to make a payment, it needs to recognize that it's you speaking.
It's also a part. I work. It's also a part of security that companies are currently working on. It was a very famous case of Alexa ordering Dollhouse. I don't know if you know it. So in American TV, it was broadcasted. It was a short document about Alexa devices that ordered a dollhouse because a child asked Alexa, order me a dollhouse. So they repeated the same intent in the TV, and all of the Alexa devices that caught it from the TV ordered a dollhouse. So it was major, it was covered in US news really widely, and I know companies that are aware of that, and they are making all they can to prevent situations like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dimensions to that. One is recognizing the user so that only adults in the household can make those orders. The other thing is that, for example, based on this issue, Amazon pushed this feature that it tries to also filter out commands that are coming from, for example, TV or from speakers in general, because that's quite a big problem, and that's like a security issue as well.
Yeah. How much logic can you already put into Google Assistant? For example, is it already possible to cover such complicated flows like ordering travel or flight booking, or ordering meals but piece by piece, like for example big kebab with rice, with mixed meat, etc., 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 and not just order me the pizza I ordered last week?
It is doable because like we have our own backend at the end of this, and unless our backend tells Assistant to stop the session, we can ask subsequent questions. So it's up to us how complicated this dialogue will be. I think the major limitation right now is the user, because when you're talking to somebody, there's a certain amount of information that you can remember, right? And if you're getting them into those complex flows, they will get lost at some point, that's for sure. So what it works best right now is making simple orders. You can ask a few follow-up questions if necessary, right? I think that was KLM, right? So some like airline or railway in Europe, they build their own assistant app for ordering tickets. And some of the users actually started using that. Virgin. Okay, Virgin Trains.
And another question, a follow-up. How far are we, or how far is Google or Amazon from establishing a common standard from the UX perspective? Like, for example, it took them 5 years to discover material design for UI. So how far are we from material design for voice?
There are a lot of aspects regarding that. So, like, this one thing, the way you invoke voice apps, which is, okay, Google ask Mega Pizza to order me pizza. This is kind of like standard right now. So both Assistant, Alexa, and Cortana use this kind of invocation for invoking custom actions, which is very convenient for the users as well. There are some standards in terms of like the low-level development. So there's this markup language for example, modulating voice in responses, and also the way how intents and those training phrases work. That's also kind of like a standard. All of those NLPs require that. There's still a lot to do in this matter, especially around those good use cases that work with voice.
Okay, so hi, thank you for your speech, and I have more or less, rather less technical question. Do you think those speakers really have any future? Because there is right now it's like limitation. You have no screen, right?
Right.
So Android TV, you have Android TV. So those set-top boxes, those TVs will have far-field mic on board really soon. So they have a screen and they can talk to you at the same time. So if you ask for the weather, let's say, you have like pictures with those clouds and suns, and you will have voice output too. So why do they go with the speakers? Just to learn the users how to talk to it? I don't really understand that.
So the thing with the speakers is that they're extremely cheap, because they cost like $49 for this kind of speaker, and they bring some fun to like households, right? If you buy that, your kids are going to get hooked up into that, just asking random questions, playing with those concepts of voice assistants. What's happening right now is we're seeing that those devices are progressing on many levels. One is like improving the speaker experience, the virtual assistant experience. Another thing is that we're seeing more and more devices that are integrated with like this voice assistant, but they also have some sort of screen or other feedback for the users. So there are smart speakers with screens, They're just more expensive and more fancy versions of that. That may be the future.
Yeah, actually, the Xiaomi Mi Box is like the price is almost the same as Google Home.
Right.
So you just buy the Xiaomi and you have all the features except the far field. But I think it's like next year maybe.
Yeah, actually I have 3 questions. Okay, the first one, how does the API look like for this thing? Is it just the editing the intents on the Google Forms or something? The second one, how does the deployment look like? And the third one is, what's the installation process from the end user point of view?
Well, that covers a lot of things. Okay, so when it comes to the API...
2 minutes for that.
Okay, so I gotta be quick. So there is this visual editor for like configuring all of those intents. There are also APIs for providing JSONs with that data, but that's more like a designer's work, to be precise, right? So you get those people who work with users to figure out what are the possible use cases, what are the phrases they may be using. So this is like a convenient visual that designers can use. Then, what's next is your API, which your backend needs to expose to Google. And there's a standard regarding how requests from assistant and out of your backend need to look like. It may seem simple, but if you add like GPay and other things like that, there's plenty of things in there. Also like managing dialog state. It's just tons of JSONs with various parents, etc. The second question was deployment, right? So there is this process that you configure this action in this Actions on Google configuration panel. When you think it's ready, you submit it to certification, just like in the App Store. And they actually run some test cases on that. For example, when you're deploying this app for like configuring all of those intents. Also APIs for providing JSONs with that data. But that's more like a designer's work, to be precise, right? So you get those people who work with users, who figure out what are the possible use cases, what are the phrases they may be using. So this is like a convenient visual that designers can use. Then, what's next is your API, which your backend needs to expose to Google. And there's a standard regarding how requests from assistant and out of your backend need to look like. It may seem simple, but if you add like GPay and other things like that, there's plenty of things in there. Also like managing dialog state. It's just tons of JSONs with various parents, etc. The second question was deployment, right? So there's this process that you configure this action in this Actions on Google configuration panel. When you think it's ready, you submit it to certification, just like in the App Store. And they actually run some test cases on that. For example, when you're deploying this app, you need to provide free sample phrases, free sample use cases for the users when they discover your assistant action, so that they're able to start using that. And for example, they verify if those work, or if the requests from your API or their API are handled well. You get certified, you get in the Actions store, I think that's how it's called. And when it comes to installation, the simplest way is when you try to talk to a certain action, so you say, hey Google, ask Megapizza to do something. For the first time, it's going to tell you, okay, so you don't have this installed, you want to install Megapizza. If you need to sign in to a third-party service, then you may redirect somebody to the phone. But yeah, that's like more complicated thing.
So unfortunately, we ran out of time. I'm sorry. But we are running a workshop tomorrow at 9 a.m. So if you are ready for a workshop on Saturday morning, you're very welcome. We will be taking some hands-on experience. We also brought our Google Home Mini, so you will have a chance to play around with a real smart speaker. Very welcome for that. And this is us. We are Upside. on daily basis we take care of doing voice applications, and we will be here around in case you have any other questions that we can answer. So thank you very much. My name is Kasia, and here's Rafal, and here are our Twitter handles if you feel the urge to tweet anything. Thank you very much.